I think one of the things that I had put on the list to talk about, and we may or may not have all had this experience, is I called it happy pills, and talking about one's relationship with being medicated or medication. And I guess I wanted to talk about it because for me, it has always felt like a real double-edged sword. I have been medicated for quite a long time, but I've also had times when I have not been medicated. And what is that? Like, do I like myself more when I'm medicated? If anyone else has any experiences on this topic, like I went through a period a couple of years ago of coming off my meds, aforementioned happy pills, and I was really hard to be around, I think, for those that are close to me and those that love me. But I also enjoyed feeling things in my life. But after 10 months or so of that, I felt too many things and had to go back on them again and have been back on them since. And I guess it was a question for myself, like as someone that does take medication, that has spent time not taking it. I don't know if anyone else would be open to sharing experience on it.
I mean, I have a very interesting probably perspective on medication. So as I said, I was hospitalised for 5 years and I was severely over-medicated to the point that I was given injections that would basically knock me out for 3 weeks. I lost any sense of like who I was, and there is a big it's currently like national scandal into the over medication, especially of autistic people in mental health units, and I have been on probably every single mental health medication known to humankind. I've been on so many since of the age of 15, and I was always very anti-medication, I think probably understandably due to being over medicated, but I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 23, and I started ADHD medication in November of 2023, and those tablets saved my life. Oh. I would not be here without that medication. And when I say that, I mean it wholeheartedly. I suffered with really like severe suicidal ideation for a very long time. And what that medication did, it was almost like I was cut in the middle and I opened myself up, and the introspection that gave me. And honestly, like, without that medication, I wouldn't be here. And I think there's a lot of like fight over specifically ADHD medication. And I have fought every single doctor who has tried to take it off me, because it's not, it's not a productivity pill. It's not an easy, for me personally, it's not an easy answer. Doesn't give me a better quality of life. It brings me, if everyone else is here, it brings me to there, but it gives me a chance to actually begin and have a life, and that's survival. And I think for me, as someone who was so anti-medication, if I hadn't started that, it really was the biggest life-changing. I also now still take I think it's an antidepressant, maybe an SSRI, and again, which was the first medication I ever started. I was like, it's useless, it doesn't work. It also tastes rank. But I now take that in combination, and as someone who has PMDD, which I think we might come on to later, the combination of those two medications is the reason I am sat here right now. And obviously, like, I've done so much work, and medication isn't the cure, but it allows me the chance to do all the work that I have done on myself.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that as well. Like, and for your frankness about it, like in terms of before, what was before, like before being on the ADHD meds, so particularly?
It's interesting. I mean, I think as someone who experienced quite severe childhood abuse, I don't remember my childhood. So it's really like, I don't really remember much, although I do, because I can tell, I can reel off events that have happened, but it's as if like I'm slightly dissociated from that person. But I think when I look back to the struggles I had from, the age of, well, all my life, I never remember having any kind of happiness or any kind of contentment. I was so hopeless. Like, I really believed that, like, I was so broken. Like, I thought there was something like fundamentally wrong with me as a person, and I did not believe that there was ever going to be any chance of getting any better. I mean, my brain goes at 1,000,000 miles per hour, and I was saying in the break to someone how, like, basically I had this ADHD thing that of like, because ADHD is like, I'm not a doctor at all. Like, I dropped out of sixth form, so like, don't, medically don't take any notice. But like, ADHD is like a lack of dopamine, not an over amount of dopamine, to the point that like when my dopamine levels drop, 'cause my brain isn't stimulated enough, I become unconscious. And it's that thing of like, I couldn't get anything done. And the biggest thing was my emotional instability, from a lack of a better emotional regulation. And that's what that medication gave me. Like, the things still happen that like in the past, if that happened, that's me like gone. Whereas now I can go, I really can't cope. I really don't like that feeling, but I am able to stop myself from acting on things that could be irreparable.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you put it so articulately, like the regulation aspect, like that has been, in terms of me taking the medication, I sort of started to feel like there's a wall, like I'm not emotionally regulated as a human being. My emotions are like this, and I found that to be extremely exhausting. And what the meds did was it just made me realize that I can feel that I'm sad somewhere, or I am a bit sad, but no, I can't go beyond that.
It brings you to the same. I think it's interesting, and I think people think of the medication as like everybody's here and we take the medication to be there. The medication brings us at best to the same level that everybody else is already at, and then we still have to deal with all of the same things that other people have to deal with their emotions and like the rubbishness of life. But medication, it's not an above, it's the idea. And I think, there's definitely, I do passionately believe, I don't think often, it doesn't ever make us to that level, but I think it gives us a fighting chance. And I think that's the difference of like, the same as, as someone who's got like physical health problems, if you're type 1 diabetic, you take insulin not to be better at regulating your sugars than the rest of the population, but as hopefully to be able to be the same. That thing of like people just wanting an easy fix, I think I can stand here and say it's not an easy fix.
No.
And I've literally just remembered that I forgot to take one of mine this morning. I was like, I haven't been taking this particular medication as regularly, and my emotions have been more dysregulated.
And it's so hard to remember, right?
Yeah, it's really
hard. And I think this is the thing, we were talking about hungry, angry, lonely, tired vibes earlier, and like, when you're not feeling regulated, remembering to do the things that seem relatively simple is really hard, and thank you for the frankness about the medication. Like, I found that, I could actually get stuff done, because I wasn't just in a wave of feeling. Also, because I'm neurodivergent as well, I have very sensory processing and awareness of sounds and lights and all those kind of things. And it was just all a bit much.
It wasn't until I was handling things better that I realised the medication worked.
Yeah.
Like, it was when like there was a situation that happened and I didn't try and kill myself. And I went, oh. I mean, there's been a lot of external factors, but it's like, oh, maybe it does work. And I think that's the problem we can sometimes do with medication, is that like the medication makes you feel better, so then you go, I don't need it anymore.
Yeah, totally.
I'm cured.
Yeah.
And then
I'm cured, I'm fit,
and then
I'm
you stop
everything.
taking it, you end up back in hospital, and then they're like, do you not think? You're like, no. And then you're like, oh, maybe I was better because maybe there was a little bit of help happening there.
I sometimes feel a bit sad about that, though. I'm not sad that I don't feel really awful, but I used to get really excited about things. I mean, I still do, but I very much I enjoyed the highs. They were great fun.
I have found that, I think, especially with ADHD medication, people talk a lot about losing creativity, losing themselves as a person. I think I'm very lucky that I am still absolutely mental.
Yeah.
Like, it really works.
I'm glad it's a bag of frogs.
So I think actually, and I know like I've spoken to people who like say like, are you not sad that you're going to have to take a pill for the rest of your life? And I'm like, well, at least I get to live for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Because before that was never happening.
Yeah.
We were not getting there. So if I have to take a tablet for the rest of my life, that's a very small price to pay to be alive.
Amazing.
Like, you look at ADHD meds, there are so many people who are ADHD but who the medication doesn't work for them. And I think that is that thing when we go back to like, it's so individual, like rest is individual. Just because it works for me and that's great and fantastic, there can be someone with the same things as me and who it doesn't work for, and they are equally as valid as I am. And I think that's something that's really important to remember, is that you're illness or your thing, which it sounds really bizarre, but I think there is definitely, with a lot of like the social media, like TikTok and like all of those things where we're like, people are like almost self-diagnosis and like the invalidation of many different things. And I think you're the only person who has to live your life. So if it works for you, and obviously like you can't go around hurting anybody else, like there is a line, but like if you're not hurting anyone else and it works for you, you're not affecting anyone else, do it. Like,
Do it.
that's your choice. And I think, and again, like when you talk about like with the mental health, I think for the difference between mental health, mental illness, mental fitness and mental wellness, and they are all different, and none of them are more valid or invalid. They are just different, the same as there is with physical health. Like we don't have this same like thing with physical health. Like if someone's got a really severe physical illness and if someone's got a cold, we don't seem to have kind of like one of them's more valid than the other in like a general. Actually, I think we do have with mental health often, I think, but like you don't need to justify what works for you to anybody else as long as you're not hurting anyone else or yourself.
Yeah, here. And like, we are all experts of our own experience. You know, and what you said, like, we're not mental health professionals. And that's what I like about the community that we've got here today, is that we are speaking about our own experiences, the things that we do to stay right. You know, understanding that life is lifey and some days are good and some days are less good. And I think with that, I'd love to maybe open up a chat about what kind of things do we do to, you know, we've got medication, which I use, others will use that too. Again, if medication's not for you, that's okay too. It's okay to do what you need to do you. What kind of tools do we use to keep us right?
So personally for me, I would say I've been through 2 waves of depression, and self-talk has been the biggest kick I needed. So I think I was about 22 when the first wave I felt, and I went to speak to the doctor, and the first thing he did was get the prescription pad ready, and I said to him to put his pen down because that wasn't the approach I wanted. But he wasn't interested in having a conversation because I've got a 10-minute slot, and a conversation is going to exceed that 10-minute slot. So I think realizing that accessibility, be it about tablets or a conversation with someone that you went to trust in the first instance, but they don't have the capacity to have a conversation. I think it was even younger than that, actually. I remember I was probably even younger and I spoke to my doctor and I said, I'm not feeling like myself. And he just brushed me off and he said to me, you're too young to be depressed. And he ushered me out of the room, and we had stuff going on at home. So, you know, that was my first experience of mind not being okay. And then at 22, and then probably after the whole domestic violence episodes, of course, one's not going to be as strong as they used to be. But for me personally, I can have a conversation with as many as people as I want, but it's the conversation with myself that's been the most impactful in moving me forward. And that takes a lot of inner strength. And there have been times I have not been strong enough to have those conversations. So it's not been that I've had a conversation with myself and I was all okay. No, there have been several conversations in my mind that have supported me and encouraged myself. And there's one module that we did, and I think that's so important. So just as you would encourage someone, forgive someone, do that for yourself. When I feel my mental well-being's declining, firstly, acknowledge it. Most importantly, don't let it progress. And if it's progressing, acknowledge it on the 2nd or the 3rd day. There's never a right time to acknowledge at what point was a good time to have a conversation with yourself or someone else. But the most important thing is being honest with yourself. I think honesty is something we all need to practice more. We want honesty from others, but yet we're not honest with ourselves. So I think that probably is one of the best first instance of medicine, the pill of honesty.
Yeah, like
And
radical honesty.
Yeah.
And also I'm hearing like actually radical self-compassion. I didn't know what self-compassion was. I wouldn't have known self-compassion if it bit me on the arse, you know. And so you go through these journeys where you have to learn such things.
Yeah.
And I think actually one of the things that Beluga does, I believe, is it is about addressing where you are at on a daily basis. Tell us a bit more about it, Georgie.
And I think it's kind of what you said. Sometimes it's just like that can't be me. Like that can't be, because there's this narrative in society that if you're young, you can't have health issues, you can't have mental health issues, and it all kind of is part of the same thing, isn't it? And it's just like I'm someone who suffers annoyingly with health challenges, and it then affects my mental health and anxiety. And I just try and take some control back, because sometimes it is just out of your control, and it's like, what can I do? And it's like you said, life just lifes you constantly. It's just like every time you think you're over it, you're like, yes, glimmer of hope, and then like you get something else and you're like, oh, why, you know? But it's just like just trying to build that resilience. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to do at Beluga. It's like, life is crap. And someone told me life is just loads of crap just chucking on you, you know? But it's just like constant. Every time you feel like there's hope, it's just like, nope.
Yeah.
And then it's like, so you just gotta like look for the good where you can, because it must be somewhere. And I think that's why it's just trying to like be there for each other, but like you said, like not distract, and like be there for yourself. And I find as well myself, sometimes I'm like so busy with everything else, and then I realize that it builds up, and then I'm not looking after myself. Maybe I've not gymmed or gone to looked inwards as well, and I'm like, no, actually, let's take a step back. And that's when I notice my anxiety increases significantly. And it's like, then when I build in these practices, I still feel anxious, but then a week goes by and I feel better. And then it's like time. I think time's the healer. And it's like, we like the best things in life that are sustainable aren't going to be a quick fix. It's like painfully, it's small things that like then add up. And it's even with my recovery of my illness, I had to go to physio for my like to retrain my legs and my vision. Like it was crazy. And I thought, oh, maybe will I ever get back to being able to read again without like feeling sick or like falling over? And then and I did. And it took 6 months to get my vision back to a point that I felt better, and I had to have like rehabilitation, and you know, with my mental health as well, like it all kind of comes as one package. And it's just kind of believing in yourself, resilience, keep going, and listening to your body as well. I think that's the key thing. But also sometimes it's difficult though, I think. It's like, listen to your body. I feel exhausted, I feel tired, but it's like trying to do something, even if it's something small, because you just see. And if you go outside and try to do something like the bare minimum, just try go for a walk. If you still feel tired, then go back and rest. But just try and just try to do something, and then you normally feel good most of the time, because you never really regret if you go outside and do something. Like if you just try, at least you feel good about yourself, or like you help someone, you feel purpose. But also like don't forget yourself, I think, as well. So that's kind of what we're trying to embody is empowerment and that resilience factor, because I was waiting for like one pill to fix me, and that's just not how health works. It's like small steps. There's like a holistic thing, and obviously like feeling seen as well. Like when you're going through something and you're like not alone in this, and it's like, you know, why is this happening to me? And it's actually like there are other people that have gone through it, and everyone's fighting a battle you know nothing about as well. So I think that's the most important thing. I think I read on the back of a t-shirt one time, and it's really important quote, and that's just like because life is challenging. Let's be real, and I think it's just.
And what did you learn from the period? It's a big question, right? And I think there's some of us here that have experienced ongoing illnesses. Like, what did you learn from the daily tiny process of moving through it?
I've learned a lot. I think it's just like that, understanding myself more, like what makes me happy, what makes me feel connected, and creating healthy boundaries, like not just keeping busy all the time, like taking a step back sometimes, but also to like really stand up for myself as well. Because I feel like there's a huge bias. Like when I went to my doctor, like when I thought I was better, I had like a severe infection that then affected my gallbladder. And I kept going back to the doctors, and I said, I've got this severe pain here. And they kept looking at me like, you're young, you're healthy, you won't have any issues with your gallbladder. Then 8 months later, I ended up being in A&E because it was affecting my other organs. I was really, really unwell. And then I had to have emergency surgery. And it turned out that my gallbladder was severely inflamed. And it could have been 8 months ago, but the fact I kept going back to my doctor and they said it was in my head and all this. It's like, because I was young, female, I'm not the typical case. They didn't take me seriously. And it's like that bias we need to remove. Like treat everyone at face value. If people say something, you should make them feel seen. And I felt worse. And then it affected my mental health, I felt anxious, felt like something was wrong with me. And it's like you feel like your opinion's not valid. And I think that's what you want to feel. You want to feel seen. But so it's just that kind of helping people, support people, and empower them. Like, listen to your body, do what's right for you. Don't do what's right for someone else, like you said as well. Like, I think it's really important. Like, everyone's different, and things work for different people. So.
And also, what I'm hearing is like something like believe people. Believe people. Why is it that we don't feel believed sometimes?
It's been in the news quite a bit, hasn't it? There've been some cases where there've been younger kids that haven't been believed, or slightly older ladies as well, and the doctors have said no, and then they've asked for a second opinion. But I think that's everyone's right now to ask for a second, third opinion. And who knows your body? Who knows your body the best? You do. They're not feeling what you're feeling, and our bodies do react to how we're feeling. So if we're not feeling good, when I was younger, if I was stressed about exams, I'd get eczema. And it maybe showed up on my forehead or here, but it's my body reacting to stress in a different way. the gallbladder. It could
Yeah,
have been
yeah,
what was going on in life, the stresses,
yeah.
but it was sitting there. Everyone's going to go through stress at different times in their life, but we're the ones who know how we feel. So yeah, I think everyone has a right to ask for a second opinion, a third opinion.
Yeah, because when I saw a consultant after my GP, who like this consultant made me feel so seen because he really listened to me, and I felt wow, like just that human element, you know, just being like listening to me, like changed perspective, and I felt hope, and I felt like, you know, wow, okay, that's amazing, and then I felt empowered, and it's just that small act, like it literally took nothing, and it just was like I then felt like, okay, I've got this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And it's actually a big act.
Yeah.
Being seen, being heard. That's what we all want.
Yeah.
in life.
Like, and that's I guess I always think about these words in terms of C's. They all seem to start with C, community, connection, care, creativity. You know, and these are a lot of the values that I know we all share, right?
Yeah.
And authenticity is another thing we're talking about. Integrity, big words, right?
Yeah.
Why? Yeah, I don't know why. I don't even know what I was going to say about them. Do you want to say something like
Compassion.
compassion? Yes.
And compassion to others and to yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think going to the question about small steps one can take, I think going back to anxious thoughts, for example, and it might be a small anxious thought, it could be something really, really big. Our body and our subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between something that is happening right now that is affecting your safety or something that's imagined or a looping thought that might be going on again. So something that's quite powerful is when you can recognise that that is just a thought. And we spoke about the positive affirmations, but having something lined up, having a flip affirmation ready, no matter how cheesy it seems, having that and repeating it to yourself. I'm good at this, I'm talented, I'm special. Just keep doing it because it will start to feel normal and it will replace that negative self-talk. And it takes time, but it's something that once you make time to do it, you make a habit and it starts happening naturally. So these things and these self-care things, the breathing and the things we notice, they might seem like it's work to start off with, but that becomes a habit and you're reinstalling these more healthier habits and different ways of being. Your body is reacting to those thoughts, whether if you think of the negative thoughts, it can bring you down. Likewise, if you positive. And I don't know, I haven't spoken about toxic positivity.
Oh God.
But actually having something positive up your sleeve will convince your body to sort of respond and feel better so that you feel better.
I think that's so important, like the anxiety point as well. For me, like anxiety is a massive issue. So I look at it metaphorically now. Like if I'm anxious, it could go down one bit where it like feeds off and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. Or I'm just like, right, what's making me anxious? Is write it down, metaphorically, like chuck it away, and then I kind of go the other way. And I find that tool kind of really helps because like you said, it's like you need to take control and like that kind of awareness and be like, wow, because sometimes you could easily just feed into it and then you get overwhelmed and it makes everything way worse. But if you just try and like deal with it.
And I think talking about toxic positivity, like, and you talked about it, mental health, mental well-being, all these different ways of talking about how we are, how we be in the world. And you can say it and it sounds trite, right? It sounds like, what do you mean? Do I just like sit here and talk myself into feeling in a better mood? Sometimes there are days when that's not a possibility. You know, certainly I've experienced them. And, you know, sometimes if you feel really bad and someone says, go for a walk, and quite frankly, you think, you know what I mean? I'm not allowed to swear to him. Not allowed to swear to him. You know, you think, you go away. Like, you know, because being stuck in that negative space is absolutely debilitating and exhausting. And the muscle of compassion, it can sound toxic positivity, it can sound wishy-washy. If we're in a position where we're able to do it, and that's not to judge people that aren't in a position to be able to do it. And again, I caveat saying I'm only saying this from my own skills and experience. I'm not an expert on anyone else's mental health. But those phrases can change the patterns in our brains, synapses. And I wondered if anyone wanted to share if you have things that you say to yourself. I can either chat about myself. I love that I'm not allowed to swear and I have to do this thing. I can either chat about myself or I can be nice to myself. Wow, you did really well there. Like, look at you. You got out of bed. You even put mascara on. Wow, boss in life, right? Sometimes it's as simple as like, you made yourself a cup of tea. Wasn't that spectacular? You know, that's as simple as I have to go sometimes. Other times it's like, hey, I totally was bossing the world today. But to say well done and to practice that when I encounter others, like we all got here today. Fantastic. We probably all encountered London Underground. Wow. You know.
Overground.
Overground, right. I think the Overground's a wee bit better than the Underground, I have to say. But does anyone else have anything that they reinforce to themselves that they might feel comfortable sharing?
I have something.
Yes.
And because I feel so passionately about supporting others, how can you help others when you're feeling like this? It's just a note that I have on a post-it note, but it's, you know, if you're doubting yourself on certain days, it's like, how are you making a difference if you're feeling like this? So, yeah.
I guess I call it service, like what you do in the world that can help you get out of thinking in the loops, you know, that actually sometimes that can be the path to feeling better. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I think sometimes, you know, you can be on such a good roll with work, but then you can start self-sabotaging what you're creating.
Yeah.
So obviously, as I said, you know, I work with my sister, probably can be so brutally honest with one another. And we're doing this from our heart, from our lived experiences. But yes, sometimes there are days that you're like, oh, is this good enough? You know, what we're doing, is it making a difference? So I just need that reminder from time to time. But and that's just my little tool just to have there. When I am in flow, just feel great. And it's just like, a bit more of that, please, like all the time. And just seeing others doing really well. Like, from the bottom of my heart, it just feels incredible when others are, you know, making a difference in their life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're all trying to do, right?
Yeah,
And to be those, you know, we're nurturing of ourselves as a discipline, but also nurturing others, and the benefit that comes from that. It does feel good, right?
Yes.
You know, and it's a two-way thing. Like being altruistic feels pretty good on both sides, right? The person that you're being altruistic to feels good. We feel good because we've helped them. You know, but that again, we worry of things like toxic positivity and sounding like saints, you know?
Giving back is one of the 5 principles that the NHS recognises universally, that are scientifically demonstrated and backed up to support our well-being, which I'm sure familiar with this. It's community, connecting with others, moving, learning a new skill, watching, noticing, mindfulness, and giving. Have I said giving back? Giving back, or gratitude, practicing that. And those are all things which, incorporating one or more of those into your day, making that a habit, obviously proven. Because I think well-being practices, there's so many, it's what suits you as an individual, and it can depend on so many things. It can depend on your beliefs, your spiritual beliefs, whether religion, whether you want something that is neuroscience backed, evidence based, whether you enjoy a little bit more esoteric. All these things are right. What works for you? What gets you into that balanced, quiet state, which is going to be different for everyone. It's even going to be different for ourselves on different days.
Absolutely.
If we've had, there might be something that works. For example, like say with breathing, which does change the physiological sort of atmosphere and the chemistry in the body, so that you will start to feel relaxed. But sometimes it might feel harder to do it. Having something else backed up and just not beating yourself up. Oh, I should be calm. I should. Taking out words like should, must, and particularly notice when other people use that as well. Does that not trigger you? If someone you should, you ought, must, and just changing languages could, might, if. Using that changes things quite dramatically. Particularly
Language matters, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I think the problem online is loads of people talk about their mental health, which is amazing, but then some people kind of make it a bit more like they're fixed, they've solved it now. And it's like, it's a constant battle. We're going to constantly, you need to adapt. The only constant in life is change. It's like adapting, being resilient, and like learning different things at different times in your life. Because as well, like you want to find, like learn more about yourself as a person as well. And I think, you know, for me personally, I have a constant existential dread. Like, it's a daily thing. And normally I have a catch up with someone and be like, they're like, oh, Georgie, you're doing well. And I was like, actually, I've done a lot. But then sometimes you focus on the negatives. So it's like focusing on the positives. And my friend sent me this really good thing. Send yourself a WhatsApp message. And then if you are having a bad day, go back and look at that and be like, wait, I had this moment. And it's like this, or like take a photo and like memorize it and like think back at that point and be like, I had this moment at this time. you know, it's going okay, or like list the things in your life that are good and positives instead of focusing on the negative. And it's easy for us to do that. And I think it's our kind of minds and the way that we are in society, like comparison or all this. And I think just focus on the positives, and also for you as well, like, you know, what makes someone else happy may not make you happy anyway, and what you want right now in your moment in your life. So yeah, because everyone's different, everyone goes through life at different paces, and it's like, you know, going through it at your own pace.
Yeah.
Don't chase, don't, you know, look for the beauty in every day, essentially is what I try to do.
We were talking about this, weren't we?
Yeah,
Exactly that.
Celebrating wins. That's what we.
Yeah.
I always say, like you said, they can. Well, they could be small, but
Yeah,
small is
Big to
personal
you,
to
yeah.
us. Small, medium, large. But just like you said, writing it down, taking a photo, documenting it, but just for yourself. You don't have to share it with anyone. But yeah, and it's just a nice way to just have this little practice, this habit. Yeah.
But I think we rob ourselves of appreciating that success very quickly. This just came to my realization. My daughter came back from a trip. They had a fantastic production behind the scenes in Sky Studios. They did a recording. There was a presenter, a director, a camera person, and they had that beautiful trip. There was a lead up to it. They were so excited that they're going on this trip. Then they've done the live day, the live recording. They've had their output, so it was all received on the same day. They got to watch each other's footage. And then I was walking her to school the next day, and I said, well, sweetheart, do you think you guys are all going to watch the footage again? Are you guys going to talk about this trip? No, Mum. I was like, what? You had such a beautiful moment together, that you've all experienced new roles, opportunities. And I thought, hang on a minute, it's not just children. It's just life is so fast paced that we're robbing ourselves of conversation, which would actually encourage us to continue to do so much better in life. So we're very hard on ourselves as people. So it would have taken us weeks to get to a point of that success. We've achieved it. Now, instead of saying, well done, G, let's remind ourselves of this at least 3 times this week of what you've achieved. What's next? Oh, now the next thing I didn't achieve very well, so I'm going to be hard on myself. I would love to break this pattern that we're all falling into. I would love every lady here, the next time you have a successful moment, in a milestone in your companies and what you're doing, kind of embrace yourself in it a little longer. Let that week touch that success moment at least a few times in that week, because you'll see that we have to create our own beautiful moment to keep us going for the next 3 weeks. That might be a bit more tough, a bit more challenging. So I think I don't want us to get to a point where life is just becoming quite intense and we're allowing it to take over. But I think we need to, as Amrit was saying, celebrate our successes more, and then encourage ourselves more as well, because people who are consuming our content are looking for us for next. But is that because we've spoilt them?
Yeah.
Have we spoilt them, that we've always got this constant drip that's coming their way? Or should we actually go in a bit of a deeper conversation? Should we go into a deeper conversation on the same topic, so they also are feeling inclusively involved in this conversation with us, rather than us just giving? So yeah, I think there's quite a few things to think about. And this realization only came to me this week, I think. So it was eye-opening for me.
Yeah. I think, didn't we say, because the production that, so little one's 11, so, you know, they're still young, they're excited. I said, let's watch that video together. Again, let's watch everyone in your class. Let's watch it together, and let's watch it again, because that's part of the joy of reliving it, being present and celebrating her joy in what, you know, her 25, 30 classmates did together. Because like you said, then it's just brushed onto the carpet. So we're not appreciating life as well. So yes, we're in the moment, but let's relive it together collectively. And that's so important.
And get the bump of the joy from it.
Yeah, why not?
Like, let's have that. Yes, please, more, please. You know? And like you're talking about, I love, I mean, should was mentioned, the horrible should, right? Shoulding all over oneself. You know, we live in an era of shoulds. You just have to turn on the TV or Instagram or all these things. You know, you should look like this at this age. You should have done this. You should not be like this. And actually, we're enough. You know, a lot of the problems I've had have come from just not believing the fundamental truth that as a human I have worth. we have worse. And what you're saying about going deeper as well is interesting. Like, rather than just moving on to the next thing, or I'll provide you with the next product, or I'll provide you with the next big idea. It's like, why don't we explore the fundamental idea we've got? The things that take us away from being present are when we don't feel well, or if we have challenges, whether they be challenges of economics or relationships, or all the things that humans face, illnesses, things that we face in life.
You really hit the nail on the head there. It's like this, when you start thinking, I can't do this, then you can't do it. But if you have the mentality like, I can do this, like you can do whatever you put your mind to it. But the problem is sometimes society says you can't, because there's barriers, right, where you are in society. If you're maybe a woman, if you're, you have certain labels, right? And if we remove those, people can truly thrive.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think it's like it's a mindset thing, isn't it? Like you said, when you realise that, like I think you can really just empower yourself and feel like, okay, I can do this. And it's that kind of empowerment that you can then thrive, essentially. And the second that you think I can't, then it's obviously anxieties come into it. It's just that trying to have that mindset switch.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've just sent shivers down my back. Because when we were just talking about the word should, what just popped into my head, and I think we spoke about it earlier, but advertising. You should, your makeup should look like this, your hair should look like this, you should be this size, you should be eating this. But everything is selling us a product. Everything is about selling, and for us not to feel good enough. So surgery, all the injectables, everyone, each to their own. I have a bit of a strong opinion, but I'm not going to share it. But because we're told we aren't good enough, but we're beautiful as we are. And all these unique perspectives and opinions that we have, they're beautiful. That's what makes us different. And, I just love hearing everyone's opinions. And I feel like personally, I've learned so much today. And I just want to say thank you for some areas that I don't feel very experienced in. And I just want to say, just sharing personal experiences, Hannah, Suzy, you've really opened my mind.
Well, I really appreciate everyone's honesty, and I feel, I have to put it in my own terms, I feel like the world doesn't want us to be who we are. It wants us to be some kind of bot or something, like a perfect AI bot. Like that AI actress that's now a thing this week. I don't know if anyone read about that. There's an AI actress now. She's got an agent and everything. Yeah, but it's not actually real, but it's going to put loads of actors out of work. There we go. That's the kind of world that we're living in, right? But the most beautiful things that occur for me occur between people, in connection, and and that was something that I wasn't able to take advantage of when I have been at my illest, and like I said earlier, I've got a diagnosis which has got the word disorder attached to it, right? And and I can often say, was my disorder not just a very rational reaction to an irrational world? Is how I feel about it. And one of the topics I brought to the table today, maybe, if anyone has any thoughts on it, if it's not your experience on it, is like, we've got all these disorders in society today, right? We've got ADHD, disorder. Like I don't feel that ADHD is a disorder, but maybe you do,
I have very strong opinions on
but
and it's interesting, honestly, like as we were sitting about like toxic positivity, and it's something that I really have a visceral hatred of positivity.
Bring it. I love this hatred. It's great.
For me, it comes from a point of, I think positivity does come from a place of privilege, and coming from, like, this is like very honest perspective of, I think, it's interesting, like, while everything everybody here has said is like so true and so valid, like especially when we talk about like being able to sit in things that you could have achieved, I have no one to do that with. And I think that like it's really interesting the amount of times that I have people who tell me, to just like, just be grateful for where you are now. If I'm telling myself that, that's okay. Like, I can tell myself to be positive. Nobody else has that right to tell me that. And I think as someone who, only very recently realised that, like, I have complex PTSD, and like, again, not a doctor, but to get a diagnosis of complex PTSD, you have to have a repeated trauma where you've been like trapped in something. I have 7 different separate situations that have caused my complex PTSD. And I think when I have people, and I have it especially with people kind of close to me now who are not in my world. They are like kind of a slightly bit removed. You know, when I am struggling and when I'm like saying that I can't do it, it's almost the thing of like a slight lack of understanding of when I say that I can't do it, the amount that I've had to get through to get to that point. And it's something that I don't like to talk about, wish I do, but I do think that sometimes the conversation can be skewed when it comes to especially like mental illness, and especially, you know, people who have experienced some of really severe trauma and like survivors of that actually like you are so valid in your feeling of like hopelessness, and actually if anybody else had experienced what you were experiencing, they would not, you know, be here. And that is amazing that we have that strength of character. You know, it's not saying that we're like superheroes or anything like that, but I think that for me, one of the biggest things that actually helped wasn't the person telling me that it was going to be okay. It was the person who validated me in that actually what you experienced wasn't okay. What happened wasn't normal. And your reaction, and therefore like the disorders that you have been labelled with because of that, and obviously that not ADHD and autism, like I'll get onto the diagnosis of that later, but like in terms of my trauma responses and therefore the way that I may behave in certain situations is not my fault. And while I have the absolute need to overcome that, and therefore like, you know, I'm very passionate about like, you know, you, just because you've been through something doesn't mean you're allowed to hurt other people. And I think that's why I'm sat here in that position, because people didn't get their own therapy that they needed, you know, in my life. So I don't want you to come and tell me that it's going to be okay. I don't want you to tell me it's going to get better. I don't want you to go try and problem solve my life, because actually I know deep down, I mean, I've only really ever mainly had myself, but those moments what I need is someone just to hug me, just to hold me. My mum calls it sitting in the shit. You can't sit in it forever because otherwise then you don't move anywhere, but there is definitely that validation, and actually sometimes we need to just sit there. And because sometimes some things that happen to people in this world, there is no bringing around that there is any positive in that. Sometimes we need that moment to go, that was really rubbish. There is that privilege in being able to have that positivity. Like a lot of the work that I do is looking at the most disproportionately disadvantaged, especially young people. And that thing of like, I talk a lot about people who've only ever had people who are paid to care. So I think that the mental impact of being a young person who has only ever been in systems, has only all your interactions of care come from people who absolutely are boundaried, because it should be, because otherwise then we have other very big issues. The sense of that on a person's perspective and worth and mental like thing is huge, and I think it's an area that isn't looked into. And I think that when we add in toxic positivity onto that, it's a really dangerous combination.
And that's fair enough.
In mental health services constantly, I was labelled that patient who I literally would just storm out of buildings, like bang doors and all of that, because when I couldn't articulate it at the time of that feeling of like, you don't get it. And they're like, we do understand. And you're like, no, but you don't. And that is why I'm very passionate about peer support.
Totally. That's what helped me. Like it was, and that's, I guess that's an interesting thing that you raise, is like, we're talking about the tools that we can use today. I can use these tools today, but I haven't, you know, the worst point of my life was 11 years ago, and I've gone through the journey that I've gone through to know myself a bit better, which is a privilege, right? To have had the privilege of all the support that I've had.
And hard work.
And a lot of hard work. God, it's hard work, isn't it? But I, you know, the things that I think about is actually where I was 11 years ago. If someone had said that to me, I wouldn't have known what to do with that information. You know, I just wanted someone to say to me, that sounds really difficult. I'm really sorry about that.
And you can sit here now and look back and you can see how far you've come. But if you have, you know, a bad day or whatever, sometimes being told, but look how far you've come, is not actually what you need. And then sometimes, like I talk a lot about, sometimes we just need to be held. And I think that, like I think as a trauma survivor and as someone who's experienced, you know, some things in life, and when you're like, I'm semi-estranged from my family and all of those things where like I live a very isolated, physically isolated life, not only with loneliness, but like actually like physically, like there's no one to turn to, you know, not having a next of kin, not like in those moments of joy, when I look at my phone and I think, who do I tell? Because there isn't anyone necessary to enjoy that moment with me. And I think actually blogs, podcasts, social media has such a power, because actually, although what works for one other person is not necessarily going to work for you, and, you know, listen to medical advice, etc., etc. However, what the biggest things that I've done is I've heard other people's stories, other people's things, and gone, that's really interesting. I'm going to bag that, but then I'm going to apply it to me in my way through my lens. There are so many toolkits. There are so many things out there that like that maybe even like doctors don't have in terms of like, well-being and like things like that. And actually, if by hearing other people's stories, hearing about how other people do things, it's not necessarily going to work like carbon copy, but like there have been things that like I've heard and gone, oh my gosh, that's really interesting. Like habit stacking was something that like was life-changing.
What is habit stacking?
So the idea of like, there are different kind of ways of doing it. I put one of my medications by my toothbrush. So the idea is that
Brilliant.
which is unfortunately I still haven't taken the medication, but it's not a good example of how it would work. But the idea is like if something you already do and you want to bring something else into your life, putting it next to it, doing it, adding it on. And I don't run. I have no plan on ever running. But like people who like they go to bed in their running gear so that they don't have that extra step.
Oh, really?
Like, it's bizarre. Like
They do though. I've heard this as well.
and like medication next to your toothbrush, or and then a slightly different turn, which is what I worked on with one of my mentees on. Was she was really struggling with like having, she was, a working mom. So she had so many things to be doing and she didn't ever have any time for that self-compassion and the things that she enjoyed doing. And I said, well, have you ever thought, just as random, of like listening to a podcast while you're cleaning? And she was like, oh my God, yeah, because she really enjoyed listening to podcasts, but she felt that she couldn't do that at the same time as doing like a chore.
Yeah.
And it was the thing about how can you add in little bits? Sometimes life is so massive and there isn't that time for your own personal time, because if you have dependents, and she would always say like, my daughter is my priority because I brought her into this world, and obviously like there's lots of psychology behind the whole thing, but obviously you also have to look after yourself and not pour from an empty cup, but also there's literally physically only so many hours in a day, like, and that thing of like, well, what can you add at the same time that doesn't, for some people, like, it could be really overstimulating, but like, what bits do work? What could you add in to little parts that are just tiny, but sometimes those tiny changes build up over a long time.
And that's kind of something that we've heard today is about the tiny things, and it's hard to enact the tiny things. And thank you for talking about the neurodivergent experience as well, and that, sometimes things that might seem normal, whatever that is, to maybe neurotypical people. Like whenever you're talking about putting things beside the toothbrush, I'm like, oh God, sometimes it's really hard to remember to brush your teeth, and that I would maybe feel a bit ashamed about that.
My bathroom sink, like it's getting a bit excessive because I try and put everything there in the hope, and I still manage to forget, because even though they're right next to it, and it kind of links back to the original thing you were talking about with like diagnosis and like it's interesting. So I was actually, very long story, but I had to go back and see mental health services last week. And this woman asked me, she's like, do you think you're mentally ill? And I was like, whoa, it was a rogue question. And she was like, you've never been asked that before? And I was like, no, I haven't. Did give me like a chance to like look at, when we look at obviously like neurodivergence feels such a massive umbrella, more than just autism and ADHD. Obviously like borderline personality disorder, complex PTSD, there's acquired neurodivergence, brain injury, Down syndrome. There's so many things, dyscalculia, dyslexia, all fall under neurodivergence, and I think sometimes that can be forgotten. And it's tricky because the question of like, is being autistic / ADHD, my profile of autism is PDA, so like pathological demand avoidant, but we often prefer to call it pervasive drive for autonomy because it describes it better and removes the pathological.
Yeah, and also it's really like girl, isn't it? It's like, yeah.
And it really explains the feeling of like how it's not, pathological, but it's actually it's a need for autonomy.
Yeah.
And when I think I like toyed with the thing of like, is it a disorder, or is it a, just because we live in a neurotypical world? I don't believe I have autism or ADHD. I believe I am. I believe it's an inherent wiring of my brain. I was born this way, and I wouldn't be who I was without it, because that's the same with like anything we have in life, and the same with like complex PTSD. I wouldn't be who I am but the thing with the complex PTSD is that I could not have had that. When I was born, although pretty traumatic from day dot, but hypothetically, you don't have to have experienced that different brain wiring. Whereas with autism and ADHD, that was always going to be the way I was. Do I think that even in a different society, that it would still be disabling. I think it still would be. I do think that autism, ADHD does have disabling characteristics, even in the most accommodating of worlds. I do think it would be better. And I think that necessarily having a disorder label doesn't necessarily help, but in the same way that if I hadn't got those diagnoses, again, I wouldn't be here, because without a label in this society, you don't get any of the help. What is a disorder? What is normal? What is all of those things? And actually, I think, the brain is such a fascinating, how things are wired. And I do think that, to say that in a neurotypical, if we lived in a different world, that people who are autistic ADHD wouldn't struggle, I think invalidates a lot of people's experiences of it. And I think also there's a really big caveat that there is a difference between autism and learning disabilities to kind of get to that. And I think, again, there's a big conversation about pathological demand avoidant profile, and that maybe not being autism. And I think that that's something that I'm interested in, because I do think that at the moment we lump everything under one name, and maybe we do need to look at actually it's far too broad, because I sit here, but then again there's so much masking. Yes, I am what would be described as higher functioning, but the detriment of that was 5 years in hospital. And and I don't think we should compare the experience. I think I hate the trauma Olympics. And for anyone who has experienced it,
tell me about, what is the trauma Olympics?
For example, if you look at mental health services, because they are so overstretched and overrun, which is they do need to be funded better, absolutely. You have the thing of to get under services, you have to hit a certain criteria. And when you look at for example, in eating disorders, I struggled with anorexia when I was younger. And when I got into adult services, I was hospitalised during camps, and when I came out in adults, my BMI was labelled too high. And the BMI criteria for adult eating disorder treatment in where I used to live was so low. We're talking, low teens. And that was the only way you could get in.
Same.
And when you think of the disorder itself, of it being a disorder where, and it's obviously, first of all, it's not actually about,
it's not about
it's
food.
Never been about food.
No.
So that's wrong in itself. But the thing of you could see it, and especially having been in CAMS inpatient, especially, it's a really sad state of, and I've actually seen young people who have lost their lives in this competition almost of this. And I think that it's something that we don't speak about, because it is so taboo and so almost scary to even comprehend that. And I think that it's through no fault of anybody, any young person, but when we live in a system where to be validated, you have to be to the extremes. And in the end, I requested to leave mental health services because I felt I had to stay sick to be validated by them. And actually that was impeding on my recovery. And actually it was when I said, you know what, see you later, that actually outside of those services, and obviously, that's very personal experience, that actually I was able to go, you know what, you don't need to be sick to be valid. And I think when it comes to the trauma Olympics, it's that thing of trauma is not comparable. And, for some people, it's how your body reacts to a situation. And someone could have experienced something that as a world we would describe as really traumatic. And someone could also experience, their cat being run over, and they could have the same response. You just can't compare. And I think that's the big thing of and the trauma Olympics is when people try to compare.
Well, it's what you want. I think your experiences deserve to be validated, and that, we are all different. And that if one person, like you said, experiences something bad, it may not feel as bad to somebody else, because we all come from different backgrounds. We'll have different levels for tolerance of stress. I have 0 levels of tolerance for stress, frankly.
The difference between trauma and PTSD, PTSD is an illness. It's a disorder. We've all experienced trauma, every single human being, because trauma is just part of, as you say, life
being life.
We have trauma, and I think sometimes maybe it's interesting that on the topic of disorder is that because of society and the way that probably social media talks about these disorders so much, that have we maybe sometimes do we disorder things that are actually just part of the human experience? And is there a different, and I do believe, when you look at illness, mental fitness, mental wellness, mental health, disorder fits into that mental illness category. Some things are just the human being experience. We get, just because you're sad, it is that classic thing of but I think it's really hard, because you don't ever want to invalidate anybody, because the amount of times that I've been invalidated when I've been, you know, really struggling. But equally, there are some things that, like, and this was part of that, I think someone spoke earlier about, like, honesty within yourself. And that's what my ADHD medication allowed me to be able to go, right, this is actually part of like a trauma response. This is part of my ADHD. This is just me being really quite lazy and can't really be asked. And you know what? That's okay. Or I just really am being quite stroppy right now. And I'm like, I just don't want to do it. And like all three things can sit at the same time.
But you're validating yourself. Sometimes when we are sad, it is an appropriate reaction to some bad shit that happened. I have found it really difficult to be called disordered because I think it was probably a very rational reaction to a set of circumstances that were not rational. And I've found it to be great because when I got that diagnosis, I was like, oh, that's me. Oh, look. Ah. But then on the other hand, it was like, oh no, that's me. And people have a stigma about what that disorder is, what it means. And they think you're going to be some kind of psycho, whatever that is. Can I even say that? Maybe not. I don't know.
It's because I was labelled borderline personality disorder. It was one of the initial diagnoses that I got, and I fought to get it removed. I think actually is the impact of whether you feel able to identify with a disorder partly to do with how society views that. And it's interesting, like with eating disorders, like people who, you know, if someone sits here and says that they struggled with anorexia, there's one response. If you sit here and say you struggle with binge eating disorder, there is a different response. And I think that like that is hugely part of the impact.
The problem.
Yeah.
Can I just say, the word disorder for me doesn't actually sit right. So because we're hearing it quite a bit, why can't they change that word? I feel
They changed it with autism.
Did they?
So originally it was called ASD.
ASD, right.
But now it's called
Yeah.
ASC.
Oh, I did not know this.
Complexity or something?
Condition.
Condition.
I'm not sure whether that makes it better or worse.
Can we not just get rid of that?
Yeah.
At the end, just
Stop
get rid of it. Yeah.
And
I
also,
feel like that's almost part of the problem.
Yeah.
What we
Yeah.
spoke about, language. Is
Yeah,
so
yeah.
important.
Language matters.
So for me, I kept hearing that word and I'm
Yeah,
like, it's
yeah.
not sitting right with me actually.
Yeah.
Because that's already making you feel quite negative and like something's wrong with me.
I wouldn't call autism or ADHD a disorder because it is never going to be cured. It's never something that's going to go away. Whereas I think that like when I think of a disorder, it's having a negative impact on you that can, with treatment or whatever, be. And I think like when we look at like mental illness, some of those maybe still again I'm not sure I like the word disorder, but like there is a thing of like with mental illnesses that are treatable. It's almost like that's one thing. But when we have something that is an inherent part of who you are as a person, like saying that like being autistic, it's almost like, yes, there would still be negatives. There are negatives of being autistic, like, you know, but also it is who I am. It's the same as there are negatives of any human being's experience. Like we all have things that are not great about ourselves. And so by calling it a disorder, it's almost like you are lowering that person to below human levels. And I think that that's where the problems come in.
And there's nothing wrong with being autistic, and that's, you know, wanting to create neuro-affirming environments that do not actively, like we're talking about a social model of disability, right? You know, the world is pretty disabling. I was thinking this morning on the train, like I got lost. The tube was just terrible. I got lost. I didn't know what station I was at, and then it was really loud, and I just thought, oh, this is horrible.
They all get on and you think there's literally another tube in 2 minutes. And they're like sat on your lap.
Yeah.
Like, whoa. I didn't consent to this. Get off.
I love that. I didn't consent to this.
I'm not consenting to the London Underground.
I never consent to the London Underground.
No.
Like it's really.
And it's also like loud, but also super silent at the same time.
It's a
like you
weird
can't-
feeling, isn't it?
It's kind of-
Everything about, to be fair, like I do have a thing of there is nothing about public transport that is neurodivergent friendly.
No.
And even like signs, like there's not easy read things. Like we need easy read signs for people.
It's just it's quite horrific actually.
Yeah, I would agree.